All right. So good to see many of you again. Again, my name is Albert Shen, running for Seattle City Council. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Pullman, Washington, came here to the UW to study environmental chemistry, global warming, ozone depletion. I'm a second generation Chinese American. My parents taught me that hard work, education will lead to success. They also taught me the importance of compassion, generosity, and giving back to the community. I've learned that when you see something wrong, you have to stand up and speak up for your beliefs. I own a small business, a small civil engineering company. You may not have heard of it. We worked on some of the biggest projects here in the region. Third runway at SeaTac, the stormwater retrofit at SeaTac, and we're on the waterfront redevelopment team. So I'm proud of the work we've done for the people here in Puget Sound. I'm currently on the board of trustees for the Seattle Community Colleges. Education for all is very important to me. So I believe that this city needs to take firm leadership on our education policies as we move forward. In my work, I deal with some of the biggest challenges we've seen in this region. I see firsthand right now the threats that threaten our city and our region. I still see people that are unemployed. I see people in long job lines. I see our children not getting the education they deserve. And I don't see our city using our resources wisely. What I don't see is a transportation policy for our 21st century economy. What I don't see is a public safety policy that embraces our diverse communities and keeps us safe. And what I don't see our city to prepare to tackle our most difficult environmental challenges, such as the Duwamish waterway cleanup. We have a lot of great industries here, the industrial manufacturing maritime core, couple that with the emerging of the high-tech biotech sectors. The city council has to take leadership to ensure that our industries succeed. Most importantly, we need a diversity of opinions of the city council to reflect the diversity of city. So with my experience as an advocate for education, running a small business and nonprofits, I can believe I'd be an effective leader on city council. We have to move Seattle forward, and we can do better on city council. So that is why I'm running. I hope to get your support.
Wow.
Is that 2 minutes?
That's 1:58. Very good.
Yeah. Extra credit.
Albert, what do you think are the three biggest challenges that Seattle needs to address within the next 4 years? And what would council do about it?
I think clearly one, as I was talking about being a trustee for the Seattle Community Colleges. Right now, we're seeing 70% of the kids come out of our K through 12 system fail basic math right now. So what I really want to do on city council is I'm tired of hearing about we can't do anything about education because it's the school board. I'm not talking about controlling it, but what I'm talking about here is city council needs an education platform, and basically I want to see an education committee on the city council. There is no committee specifically designated for ensuring that we have education policy for this city. That means getting the K through 12 system, the early learning, our community colleges and four-year institutions on one platform to outlay and define metrics of success, what we want to see for our city's education.
What would be the biggest plank or the most important plank of that platform?
The biggest plank? I think early learning, K through 12 right now, and the connection is access also for a lot of kids that aren't getting access to the quality education and distribution of that equity.
How do you provide that as a city council?
Well, this is, if we can, let's just say, I believe if we can have an actual mechanism to have these conversations, because right now, from my view as a trustee also, in having discussions with, the K through 12 or the four-year institutions, it's a very siloed discussion right now. So if the city council can provide leadership as far as, let's have that committee, ahead of that committee, and make sure that we have all the right players at the table, define our strategic vision of what we want to be forward as far as education. That is how I think we have to have that absolute discussion.
We're going to hold questions from the floor while we go through these opening statement remarks. Okay. Albert, please sit down.
Oh, okay. All right.
So one of the challenges is education. Within the next 4 years, what else are we going to focus on?
Public safety is clearly one that we're seeing very big challenges right now. I took a police ride along the day after the primary. It was very evident what was going on. It was actually around this precinct, this whole area. And they said, Albert, do you hear anything on our radio? I said, no. He says, this is our day. We've got a lot of, this nonviolent street crime, drug dealing, prostitution, urination, but right now the police are not feeling compelled, or they're not feeling empowered and trusted to do police work right now because of DOJ oversight. So it was very evident the fact that during this ride, I asked, well, how many cars are out right now patrolling? Said 8. There was almost twice the number of parking enforcement cars out right now. So that is where the city's priority right now is as far as parking enforcement. So one of the first things I want to do is correct that. One thing is make sure, empower our police and get them the trust and respect to be able to do their job. And the other part is, let's look at the parking policy. That's got to be taken back. I think we're all challenged with downtown parking and wherever. we have to, this 8 p.m. parking BS to me has got to stop. So, bring back to 6 o'clock. That ensures businesses downtown and other parts of the neighborhoods that are being metered right now can get access so people can come in, use those services. My family, we used to run a restaurant. Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday nights were the slowest nights of the week. And right now around town, if you go downtown or anywhere else, you got to park, you got to pay till 8 o'clock. So, and those are the slowest nights. We have to do everything to make sure our local, retail, small businesses and restaurants have revenue to succeed. Otherwise, we're going to lose to the east side. So,
That's two.
yeah.
What's your third thing? 4-year horizon.
4-year, transportation. I think that's when
You're
we're
gonna
all.
fix it for 4 years, right? Oh, okay.
Sure, why not? Being in the transportation industry, I think I've seen some of the biggest challenges. Our growth is exceeding our ability. Our transportation is not catching up with our growth. Mass transit is clearly, I think, eventually the best way to go. DC Metro runs 200 million annual passengers a year. Shanghai system runs over 2 billion passengers a year. Even Tehran, Iran, has a mass transit that runs over 80 million passengers a year. Our system right now runs 3.5 million passengers a year. That is not enough to keep pace with where you need to be at. So I clearly want to start the dialogue to make sure that we get a real mass transit system here where we can move people quickly and efficiently. There are 70,000 senior citizens in this city right now. How are their needs being met? Is bike lanes all over the city necessary? If they are taking away our roadways, our freight and mobility are being challenged, our industrial manufacturing are 17% of the jobs and 34% of our B&O tax revenue. 50% of the seafood eaten in the United States comes through Seattle. That is an economic engine for this city. Our freight mobility and our ability to provide commerce for the city is being seriously challenged by this non-integrated transportation plan. We got bike lanes, light rail, you got streetcars, but how does it all come to an integrated plan? It is not. So they're planning to building another few hundred miles of bike lanes in this city. Right now, we're at about 160 miles of bike lanes since 2007. We're looking up to 400 here in the next 4 years. So we're not growing our roadway capacity. Everything's getting squeezed on the roadways. I love bikes, it's healthy, but they have to be completely grade separated, like the Burt Gilman, totally separate lanes to get them off the roadway so there's no incidents for accidents and deaths.
Okay, let's look at a 20-year horizon. What are the big issues?
All those.
All of them, okay. All right, I guess that wasn't
No.
very-
So
Bad question on my part, because that's
Yeah.
exactly what Mike said as well. Okay.
Yeah.
What are the first 3 things you will accomplish if elected?
First 3 things? Well, I think, as I talked, that's the education is clearly number 1 on my list as far as making sure, to me, that's an immediate fix. What we're seeing right now is an absolute crisis right now. We have to take control of it. If we don't, things are just gonna, we're losing out. We're importing more people here than using the people that we have are educated. If we're gonna be this growing, international, world-renowned city for high tech and biomed, we have to make sure our education system supports industries here, because in the long run, economists say, the better you have the local education folks here that are going through the system and to be up through the economy, that's better for local. So education is clearly 1. And I said public safety is number 2. It'd be a little bit more specific on that front from an economic development model. Our tourism market is huge here, and we have to do everything to support the tourism industry. And I think that's where the city council and this mayor have not failed on, that we are an international city. Part of the job of the city is to be the chief marketing officers around the world and around the country. Let's attract as many people to come here. It's a vibrant city. We have great environment, the scenery, clean air, fresh water. And our tourism market is hurting because of the public safety issues downtown. So our hospitality and restaurant industry needs that tourism dollars to be able to sustain.
Let's go to the floor. Any questions? Rick Barrett.
Rick,
Yes,
hey, Rick.
Education.
Yes.
My youngest children, boy and girl twins, are now 28. They went K through 8 at alternative school number 1, which was just sold by the school board and is up to be demolished and turned into condos.
To condos?
Condos or
Oh,
apartments.
okay.
Condos, I don't know exactly what's gonna go on the site, but the school is being demolished. My girl continued on to alternative school. She attended Oliver High School through Nova, at Nova. My boy went to Roosevelt. Now, would you, if you can get in there, would you look at the very poor support that the school district has given to its alternative schools. They've tried to starve them, strangle them. They have to get used textbooks. Parents have to bring in books from home to stock the libraries.
Yeah.
We had to go through just as individuals, to wire the school for Ethernet. We just did it as volunteers on the side. The whole place,
Is there a question,
the
Rick?
school
Is
system
there a
is
question?
being run by volunteers. Can you fix that?
Okay.
Can you do something? Can you try to fix it?
Yes,
Can
yes.
you attend to it?
Well, so that's the purpose, I believe, of having the advantage of a committee of education on city council, is that to be able to, for folks like you or other organizations to come tell that story, and it formulates into overall plan of how we're going to address the overall education needs, from the alternatives, to the, the mentally challenged, and, I mean, all the challenges that the K through 12 system face, to have that, a place to have that dialogue, right? There really isn't, so, yeah.
This was such a challenge. The PTA there even got so every
Okay.
school, every classroom had a computer, and every child in the school had an Apple computer, and they couldn't connect, they couldn't get funds from the.
In the
from
interest
school.
of letting other people
Wireless.
have time
Rich,
for
Rich.
questions,
Yes.
for the
Rather than
custom
statements,
comments,
let's try and keep it to a question, okay? Jeff?
Do you think it's adequately safe for the average Seattleite right now to get around town by bicycle?
There are parts that are very challenged and there are parts that are safe. I think when you get into the high-density areas and, like the round down by the ports, I mean, those are clearly areas that, there's been fatalities down there. Downtown is getting more dense and more congested. So there are clearly areas, I live right on the Lakeview, near the Lakeview Boulevard overpass, and there were just two shadows on this bridge that goes over I-5. And I see all the time potentials for cars impacting a bike, and if at the right time, they'll just go right over onto the freeway. So there are areas that I think are very safety challenged, and like I said, I want to see that, a safe biking environment for folks. I mean, I like to do it too, and I have one, but I don't do it anymore just because I just don't feel safe to do it. At the amount of construction going around too, truckers everywhere, so it's just very challenging. So we have to mitigate that by finding better alternatives as far as a solely separated bikeway for folks, so,
Jan?
yeah.
A different topic altogether. Income side of the city, have you looked at that, and have you considered impact fees, and if not, why not?
Impact fees. Oh, like
Development
affordable housing.
impact.
Yes. I think this is one thing where I clearly differ than my opponent on, like what happened at South Lake Union. It's based on this ideology that, that people that have workers that want to live in these more higher incomes areas. For one, the cost of living, like in South Lake Union, is a lot more expensive. And, and my office is in Chinatown International District, and, there's 4,000 people that live down there. We're in an affordable housing complex, my office, and there's 55 families. And in the Asian American community, there are grocery stores, they pick up their schools, they're a national health clinic, so it's their sense of community. So if there's an opportunity for, South Lake Union incentive fees and those developers, impact fee, to help in other neighborhoods, to take that money to enhance other neighborhoods. The Rainier Valley, I was down visiting the other day, they're screaming for some type of investment down there, for economic development investment. So why not leverage that money instead of telling developers, we're gonna make it so expensive that they're not gonna develop? There's certain basic economics I don't think he understands, plus the financing on, these big developments. Right now, because of the recession, it's only the big developers with the liquidity that can get through the underwriting guidelines to be able to fund their projects. So the small developers are squeezed out, but the underwriting guidelines, with a 1.2 debt service ratio, they have to show X amount of revenue they're going to generate for that. So they're going to look at that and they're going to say, well, it's not going to pencil out for us downtown, so we're not going to do it. Therefore, it's cheaper to do some of these constructions incentives in other parts of the city. You don't have to go as high, and then they can invest that money locally in other parts. So the impact fees, I think, is a great model, I think, from a private-public partnership to use that money to invest it wisely. So that's how I see it, so.
Brian?
Yep.
Well, first of all, I think that you're talking about transfer of development rights when you're talking about actually moving the money from one neighborhood to another. Impact fees generally are for the neighborhood that the development is occurring in to pay for
Right.
infrastructure in that neighborhood. You have a consulting company and you have contracts with the city of Seattle. Would you be, well, you have a waterfront.
Oh, yeah.
You
We're
partner with-
sub-consultants to big companies on it, yeah.
Would you be giving up those consulting contracts?
Yeah, I would have an exit strategy. You know, I wanna give back to the city, so, you know, I've run my business for 15 years, so it's like, okay, next chapter, so whatever happens. Yeah.
There would be no conflict of interest?
No, I would look to step out of, or I have other family in the business, I can give it to them. I was like, yeah.
I mean,
so.
we're not gonna name the waterfront after.
No, maybe after Bill.
Good idea.
Yeah,
Public safety downtown.
yes,
It keeps coming up all over the place.
Yes.
And everyone keeps saying, it's either terrible or it's worse, or some people say it's
Yeah.
not. And you just mentioned it, you brought it up yourself, is it's something needs to be done.
yeah,
And then the word DOJ comes into the conversation. I have heard no one come up with a plan or how they want to
Yep.
approach this problem, which is very real. So I'd like to know from you what specifically you are going to do if you're elected as city councilman to help
right.
solve this problem, which is, let's just focus on this downtown.
Right, so specifically downtown, so the Seattle Restaurant Alliance has endorsed me, and I'm talking a lot of hospitalities. There is a diversity of issues downtown right now. You know, you've got people that are truly homeless, and you got some scam artists down there. You know, I met with the Seattle Hotel Association, they showed me clear pictures of a woman, elderly woman in a wheelchair with a sign that says she's a veteran, she's disabled. They took a picture of that, and then a few hours later, she walked away. Someone else came and stepped in her spot. Another guy stepped in. So this is one other part that's going on. The other part, open air drug dealing, urination. So we have the city has a $58 million health and human services budget right now. So, and I've said, what the hell are they doing with that money? Because there are avenues to take that money and strategically make sure that if there are people that are homeless or have mental issues, let's get them those problems. And they know who these people are. And the other part is, and what I want to work with the police department specifically is, there are those that simply need to be arrested and go to jail. I mean, there needs to be consequences to their actions. I mean, right now, the police just doesn't have the enforcement to do that. So specifically, the panhandling law that Tim Burgess had tried to pass a couple years ago, because my opponent and the mayor decided they didn't want it and he switched his vote. Some sort of legislation needs to come back to give the police the empowerment to do their job. Right now, they don't have that. It's only by citation. So a $20 citation to someone on the street isn't going to any consequences. So for those that are problem offenders, there has to be consequences to their actions, and they have to be prosecuted. But then there are those that have to be helped. So, you know, there's a couple thousand people that stay in our shelters here. Over half of those are from outside the Seattle area. So because we have a very robust health and human services philosophy and budget, we are attracting other people from other parts outside Seattle to use our services. So I want to make sure like these services actually are helping people get out of the poverty or wherever they're in need and not stay there chronically, and we're just continuously feeding the problem. $15 million a year goes to our shelters and services that help people. $15 million a year. And there's on average 2,000, 3,000 people that we're helping continuously. How are we making sure they get out of the system and just feeding it so they stay in the system? So I believe that if we fix that, give the police the empowerment to do what they need to do, and just take immediate action, I mean, it's the basics, I think, is what's needed to do. We just seem to be trying to talk our way out of it. We can't.
So are you going to come up with a specific plan? You're going to ask who?
I would ask the police, I would ask the Health and Human Services, let's target our money and make sure that people get out. You know,
This is what we want to get done, and this is how.
yeah, this is how we're gonna do it. I mean, it's
I haven't seen that anywhere.
yeah, and I don't, to me, I'm a little mind boggled why they don't. You know, they got this city center initiative right now, but there's really no teeth behind it. So, you know, we actually, you know, we keep talking about, and this problem with, I believe, I'm clearly different than my opponent and the city council, is they keep talking about criminalizing poverty. You know, we don't want to criminalize, I agree, but there are those that are criminals that need to go to jail too. So, but they seem to be discussing it as an overall whole, that, you know, that they all are, we can't criminalize them. But, you know, frankly, there's that need help and there's that don't, so.
I think one way to deal with the issue, to the extent it is an issue of public urination, is public restrooms.
Yeah,
The
yep.
city tried the mega project approach last time, that failed. There's more affordable options other than putting plastic porta potties
Right.
out in the alleyways. But this is a need not just of homeless people on the street, but of
Right.
ordinary citizens too.
Yes, yes.
Especially when the stores are closed.
Yep.
We're building parks in this city that have no public restrooms, believe it or not.
I believe it.
My question is about transportation. We're going to be, Bridging the Gap levy is going to be coming up here
Yep.
in a couple of years. My strategy would be to see that renewal is focused on addressing the backlog of basic maintenance and basic, the missing links in the transportation infrastructure, not the new mega projects. I think
Right.
part of the problem with the initial Bridging the Gap was that so much of the money was diverted to the bright shiny objects like Mercer Street.
Is there a question on
And
the record?
instead of, yes, my question is, do you agree with me?
Yes, yes.
Because the mayor, if this mayor is reelected, he's gonna be out there saying, no, we
Okay.
gotta fund the
Yeah,
balance.
this- We're not talking about the mayoral debate. Let's ask the councilman what he would do related to bridging the gap.
Yeah.
Yes, clearly one thing that this city has not adopted, and I think one thing that needs to occur internally, and I think Dow has done very good at the county level when he got in office, is adopt lean management principles. Look at efficiencies within the government internally, is to find cost-saving measures. Because, I in the engineering industry working for the city on contracts, I see the waste. I mean, there's just a lot of duplication, redundancy. You gotta go talk to 10 different departments to get a permit, and it's just, there's not a very streamlined system, to be able to.
What a surprise.
Yeah, and that's one issue I think is, as far as in bridging the gap, and is how is this money being used wisely, as I said in my opening statement. There are certain parts of the south end of town, you look at the South Park Bridge, I mean, for Christ's sake, it's been 2.5 years, and this is my opponent, the great social justice advocate and the mayor, haven't really gone out to say what is going on down to the south end of town. I have friends that have businesses down on the south side of South Park. Their revenue is down 30%. They serve underserved people. They're a dentist. So where is that, be able to push, I know that's a county
Paul Allen
project.
doesn't live there.
Yeah, well, okay. So, but be able to, advocate for those down there. But to answer your question, yes, okay.
You pointed out there's about 3.5 million transit trips in this.
On light rail, yes.
Yeah. How, have you thought out, what are the costs and how are we going to take care of the operating costs if we radically increase the number of transit trips, light rail and so forth? Right now, we're at least 1% on sales tax, with car fees and everything. Have you looked into what the costs are and where's the money gonna come from?
The O&M costs? You mean the operation and maintenance costs for light?
Because it's, what is it, 20%? of
Yeah.
your cost
Well,
of the
just-
fare box? The rest comes not out of the sky from the federal government?
Just as a total example here, I'm sure most people have taken light rail, right? There's really when you pay revenue, when you pay to use the light rail, there's really it's totally the honor system, right? I mean, there's really no way, a gate or anything to track that, whether you've paid or not.
No, it's not an honor system.
Yeah.
They have enforcement officers on the train, and if he finds you without
Right.
your fare in your pocket, you get $127.
Correct, but how robust is that? I mean, there are people that abuse that, I see it. So, is the ability to enforce to make sure if you're gonna use it, you have to pay for it. So, and I can guarantee you, there are people that abuse it, and I hear about it, so, and when I've been out on the trail. So, yeah, so that's a lot of money in the end of the day that can go back and feed, the
That's not
operation.
gonna feed a lot more
No.
trips.
But that's one way to make it more
What if
efficient,
you're
the system.
successful instead
Right.
of the 3.5 million light rail, but if say we add another third to the transit.
Is there a question?
How are we gonna fund it?
Is there a question?
The question is, how are we going to fund it?
Okay, how are we gonna fund additional transit?
Well, we clearly need a reform of our tax system here, I think, and, for example,
Have any particular way you favor, or?
I haven't really, I don't have legislative staff to do
You
this.
just wanna increase transit, you don't?
No, they're
Someone
clear.
else's
Well,
problem.
for one, you look, what's going on down the state, we couldn't get a transportation bill passed here, okay? So I think clearly what set that stage was when, the mayor and, frankly, my opponent opposed the deep bore tunnel, and they accused the governor of, we can't trust her. So once you destroy that relationship with her and the WashDOT, they're not gonna pay attention to us. And look what happened. We couldn't even get local taxing authority. Yeah, exactly. But it's that they remember, WashDOT remembers. So these agencies don't forget. And there's, we have one of the worst relationships with the
We
state
don't have a
transportation.
plan then
For what?
For funding.
For funding? Well, yeah, I would definitely work with the state, I would work better with the governor and the state to be able to come up with a plan for that funding.
You let the governor and the state work that.
Well, no, I would want to lead that discussion. It's part of having that relationship with them to be able to do it. So, you know, when you don't have the relationship, how are you going to come up with a plan? So,
Right.
yeah.
You talked a little bit about instituting a lean management
Yes,
system.
yes.
I would like you to look at King County. They instituted the lean management system. It boils down to more managers who are Republican appointees, and it really hasn't worked. So be careful about copying anything that King County has done
Right.
on lean management, because it didn't work. And there's a lot of frustrated workers in King County.
Okay.
I just want, I
Oh,
heard
really?
that
Do you work for the county?
I retired.
Oh, okay.
I have to say that Sal Constantine has hired a number of people who are Republicans to run his government.
Right.
And under lean management, and it's really destroying the functionality of.
Interesting. Okay, all right.
Albert,
Thank you.
I want to follow up on your, related to the revenue streams and so on. Right now, the bulk of the city's revenue stream comes from economic growth, development, and consumption, which are arguably not sustainable. It talks about growth,
Right,
growth, growth,
right,
growth, growth. What would you do that would perhaps find a way to get revenue that would be a more stable revenue source for us?
Well, as I said earlier, you know, our industrial area, our maritime industries are actually really part of why we got through the recession much more quickly. I mean, these are industries that really didn't suffer too much, especially the maritime industry. And, you know, my role in the Seattle Community College is we have lots of different programs. We have a maritime program. We brought in a new ship from DC, you know, to really bolster our maritime program and provide those long-term economic jobs to be able to sustain the shipbuilding, because they're going to need thousands of welders, you know, in the next few years here. And it's a huge demand we're seeing. So we have, and I said, we have a lot of great successful foundations, the high-tech sector, the biotech, you know, ones that bring higher per capita earnings rather than just purely the retail sector. Those are industries we have to make sure they have the model and ability to, you know, to improve and grow and thrive to be able to do that. So we have great strengths, and that's what I want to find is, you know, areas where they can improve on that, so.
About the good education program that Seattle Times is doing a lot of advertising for, and the people that are on those ads. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars for that publicity campaign, and they've got hundreds of millions of B&O tax exemptions, and not one of those people have offered up their tax exemptions to fund education. So, you know, like Boeing, Microsoft, and everybody else is on that campaign. They don't want to pay for the education for their workers coming up, but they expect everybody else to pay for it. So, is there a little double standard going on with that?
So can you repeat the first part again? I'm not quite.
The advertising campaign in the Seattle Times that they're donating the ad space for, with all the companies that are for advocating increasing educational spending.
Okay.
Not one of those companies have offered up their B&O tax exemptions to fund education.
Okay.
Okay, so you're asking, would he remove
Right.
B&O
The
tax
B&O
exemptions? Is that what the
the
question
Well,
is?
B&O
yeah,
exemption.
instead of having the regular taxpayers fund education system, if companies are gonna get directly benefit out of it, shouldn't they, part of their tax revenue help pay for the education system?
That's old thinking. New thinking is you make the general public pay and you take the benefit.
Okay, questions from the floor? Robert?
This is the same question I asked your opponent. We have two sites in the Rainier Valley that are industrial, the Pepsi bottling plant and the Dairy Gold plant.
Yes.
They're both zoned C1,
Okay.
and I would hate to see them replaced, because right now they have
Correct.
family wage jobs.
Right, yes.
I hate to see them replaced with a Walmart.
Yes.
So are you willing to change the zoning to preserve the industrial use and also to zone out big boxes?
Yes.
Thank you.
There you go.
Very good.
I'd like to hear your position on outdoor advertising
Outdoor advertising.
signs.
You mean like the electronic ones or the big super
Fast moving,
graphics?
flashing, and also on buildings.
Oh, you know, I think I kind of learned about that last time I was here.
What's your
the
position?
presenter on that,
So
yeah.
you should be able to respond to that.
Yeah, I should. I think, yeah, the visual pollution I can see as an issue. So I haven't really looked on the both sides of it, but, you know, I mean, there are some businesses in their areas, and if that's where their business is, I'd be more concerned about the big digital electronic ones that light up. I mean, those I think can be very distracting.
The other guy here said that he thought that there was so much money in it that he might be in favor of it. That's my paraphrase of his position.
In favor of,
Well, paraphrase.
Allowing digital advertising on public spaces.
oh,
That's primarily what we're talking
it's
about.
in public right of ways or in?
Yes.
Bus stops. and-
Yes, yes,
Third Avenue.
That's what the city is now pushing for.
They're pushing for that? Oh.
yes.
You know, I honestly, I don't know right now, so after I saw that presentation, I haven't really looked into it, but I see the concern, so, I'm willing to listen about it, so I just don't know enough about it to really take a stand
Sell
position.
it at any cost.
What's that?
Would you sell it at any cost?
At any cost? No, you know, there would have to be a due diligence as far as what are the impacts, the visual impacts to, say if there's residential homes around the area, is that brightness impacting the visual, you know, the
There are
people
no
that live in
legal
those?
protections.
There are no,
There are no legal protections.
yeah, so,
Okay.
okay.
At the present time, the streetcars, and I'm thinking of the South End Union Trolley, absorbs about $26 per passenger of extra funding just to make that thing work. Their annual maintenance is $2 billion a year. Are you in favor of terminating any further concepts of streetcars that absorb such inordinate amounts of funds and essentially robs the bus system?
I think with what we are doing right now will be enough. And I would like to see, like I said, I'm more in favor of big mass transit than what we were seeing on the streetcars. And, you know, how that decision got to where it is. But given what I'm seeing as a direct result of the construction impacts for us down in the Chinatown ID, you know, businesses are down 30%, some have shut down. And they're putting a maintenance spur down 8th Avenue toward Dearborn. That's where my offices is. That's where a senior daycare center is. That's where a children's daycare is. There's a children's park. And those people were never notified this was happening. But, you know, I have to say, with what's in place now, there's no stopping it. But I would seriously question moving forward if we need any more streetcars. Because honestly, yeah, per dollar per mile, is it worth it? I mean, that's the question. You're right. Is it worth it? So,
One more question.
yeah.
We have lids going on Montlake and a proposed lid over Interstate 5. If you take a look at the construction project for SR 99 and 520, one at $4.2 billion and the other $4.8 billion, with $9 billion for less than 9 miles of roadway. Most of those costs are for lids on freeways.
Lids
Yet if
like-
you travel from Seattle to New York, no other state or freeway has lids. Are you in favor of terminating all lids at Montlake and on I-5?
Are you talking freeway lids? Lids,
Yeah,
lids
covering the
over
freeway,
it?
covering the
Yes.
Is that what they are proposing right
Yeah,
now?
yep.
Oh, I hadn't seen that plan
It's
yet.
the state that's doing it, it's not the city.
The state's doing it at the behest of Seattle. Are you in favor of terminating it? That's why, by the way, that's why DOT hates Seattle. Because of the exorbitant amount of money being there for Christmas tree decorations to satisfy the Montlake neighborhood.
Interesting.
Those costs are huge. The downtown tunnel, for example, the power consumption 70 megawatts a day, 1.4 million bucks. That kind of power represents something like 60 wind turbines just for the Deepwater Tunnel. No wonder DOT is pissed at Seattle. And that's so that the downtown businesses can gain the benefit of 1.9 billion.
Okay.
Is there a question in that?
I think his question was I in favor of the
Is that
lids.
fair-
You
is
know,
that fair? Okay.
honestly, I don't know right now. To be honest, I'm being totally honest, I don't know. I just don't.
Seattle has a 20-year growth plans. We're currently at about 100% of our growth plan through 2024. So we're ahead about a dozen years on our
Yes.
growth targets. Council last year adopted a new growth targets from the PSRC of 70,000 new households over the next 20 years. Okay,
For within Seattle.
Within Seattle, it's a
Okay.
20% increase in population. Where do you think that growth should be within the city, within the urban villages? Would you like to see expansion of that into single-family zones?
No.
How should the city absorb that growth?
Not into the single-family residential zones. I mean, that's clearly, I think, one thing we have unique in Seattle is we have many unique suburban neighborhoods. You know, the Ballards, the Fremonts, the North End. I mean, these are single-family residential zones. Now, if there are major intersections where there's major transportation hub points, then yes, I think development makes sense in those areas to accommodate those folks. But, you know, getting to the whole growth thing here is our fundamental issue is we just don't have that mass transitability like other cities. You can't, and that ties into affordable housing because, you know, this whole thing about workers getting to their jobs, you know, that aren't the high-paying jobs, and they have to live in town because they just don't have an easy and cheap way to get into town. So if there's an easier and cheaper way they can get into town quickly, like in New York or DC, you can take the red line and be in downtown in DC within 30 minutes. We don't have that ability here. So some lower income areas like South Park or, you know, way down at the south end by the airport, Burien, we just can't move them quickly enough. Therefore, their cost to be able to get into work is so much more. They spend more time on the bus, or they have to drive. They got to pay exorbitant parking fees, and just eats into their normal wage of what it would take. So, so it's a very challenging question. But I think as far as single neighborhoods, I'm very hesitant about that. But there are areas, you know, where they're already going. But they're developing it so quickly, our transportation infrastructure is just not on pace with it. So we need to actually strategically look at that.
Growth has been very unbalanced within the city.
Yes.
Some neighborhoods like Ballard are at 300% of their growth targets through 2024, close to 300%. Other areas in the south end have not even begun to scratch. We haven't seen enough TOD development, for example, in the south end, despite all the
Yeah.
rhetoric about TOD. What would you as a council member do to make that more balanced growth?
Well, so like I said, I was meeting with the Rainier Valley Chamber folks the other day, and you know, that was one of their main issues was, you know, jobs and economic development. So they say, Albert, do you have any ideas? You know, as what we could do. I said, you know, actually, yeah. And they actually were looking at, they would like to see startups or other technology based or something to utilize their areas. They told me that near the Sound Transit stations, there's these empty lots. They're just sitting there unused. So, you know, what is Sound Transit doing to them? What can the city and the Sound Transit? I would say, let's find ways to make this affordable for some startup business to come in here to do it. I suggested to them, the governor's going to speak to them. I said, well, let's talk to the governor's office as far as, you know, any grants to be able to provide incubation funds to promote, you know, the Rainier Valley. The University District right now has done a strategic plan through OED with the UW to, you know, revitalize or keep building upon U District. So, you know, I passed that information on to the Rainier folks, and they didn't know that was going on. So it's kind of a cross communication of what else other parts of the city, best practices. You know, the U District has the advantage of UW being a major institution next to it, but with its weight. But, you know, Rainier Valley, I think, has some opportunities. And they told me they were interested in an educational institution down there. Mm-hmm. You know, there's the PacMed building, or they were interested in South Seattle Community College coming in, maybe doing some sort of project to build up some sort of base institution that they can grow upon. So there is good property down there. It's affordable, and I think it's kind of ripe for that. Or maybe put the Sonics arena down there, right? So, so who knows? So.
Question, Rick.
Yes, I have a question about what you would do about what I'm just about to briefly describe to you. We were just found out in Haller Lake, which is at the extreme north end of the city. We butt up against the city of Shoreline.
Right.
We run across the middle of Seattle's north there. We've just announced that there's going to be a sound transit station put in either at 145th, which is the boundary, or I think now they decided they figure 130th, which is right in the middle of the Haller Lake neighborhood, which is all residential, except for one small lot. Everything within a quarter mile there is a single family zone. The transit-oriented development demands that there be a certain density within a half mile of this station, which means they're going to wipe out a huge chunk of single family to put in enough to satisfy the density requirements. They're going to be high rises all over the place. How can you work to ease what's coming up to be basically the destruction of the Haller Lake community?
So what would you do to support the community as it evolves into higher density?
Oh, as that changes.
What will you do?
What will I do? One, communicate. So, you know, obviously get the input from the local community concerns, help facilitate that with Sound Transit and their development folks. I guess if there are Yeah, there's concerns of the impact. So you're talking about eminent domain, that they would actually take over?
Oh, yes, oh,
They're-
yes.
They're looking into eminent domain?
I must say that they had a meeting at the Northgate Community Center last month, and this never came to the fore during the meeting. It was as if it didn't exist.
So the neighborhood never got communicated this was happening? Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely correct. I'm
Really?
the land use chair for our community. We never heard of it. It wasn't on the agenda. to talk.
Interesting, okay.
Brian, last question.
You talk about affordable housing, and many cities are adopting plans where they pass a law that the city can exercise eminent domain to take over underwater mortgages.
Oh, right.
Have you read about that? And
I've read
how
some
do you
blurbs
think-
about
What do you
it.
think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting concept. Has it worked, or?
Apparently it's working great in the places where they've done it.
Yeah, correct.
Really?
Mortgage industry is not in favor of it.
The what?
The mortgage industry is.
Well, clearly not, I know.
Banks probably
I'm not
are
the one
not
who
interested
sued,
in
I
it
don't-
at all, but.
Well, Richmond in California is doing it, and I believe it's gonna go to
Yeah.
court because there are serious constitutional issues involved of any city, Richmond, taking over with condemnation proceedings, mortgages that are underwater, and then refinancing the house so that the resident can take it. And
It's
Wells
not like doing it
Fargo,
for a big business, right?
Wells Fargo and company are.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's innovative, you know, I
If Wells Fargo
could,
is opposed to it, then we're certainly not going to allow it to happen, for God's sake.
well, let me, I just want to speak to that real quick. Look, I know in this city, you know, there's approximately 30% of homes underwater. There's about half of those homes with mortgages or have an equity of 20% or less, and there's probably about 10% that are, you know, they're just simply behind, you know, and I'm facing similar challenges, you know, so how do we work with the financial institutions to get people out of this situation? Because that is clearly, I think, one part of the drag on the economy right now, as far as, you know, people's ability to upward mobility. You know, you got kids coming out of school, they can't get a job, and how are they gonna build retirement and for their savings? And they'll never see Social Security. I know I probably never will. And so, you know, we've lost. I'm really, you know, we've lost so much net worth of this economic recession. You know, $1 trillion of net worth wiped out overnight. You know, the big institutions came out ahead, and the average everyday middle class American family wage worker is behind. You know, and that right now, and I saw the number was 30%. Over 50% of the kids right now over 30 are behind in the retirement is where their parents were at that time. So we have nationally, we have a huge economic problem. So this discussion right now, how good Seattle is doing, you know, I'm hearing, you know, in the other races, you know, like the mayor for my opponent, I disagree, because it is not all that rosy. There are people that are underwater and struggling. They can't build upward mobility. So this thing of eminent domain is interesting. I can see the banks just, you know, they're not going to want to go along with it, but I think that's really more of a federal advocacy level type of thing, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Okay,
But
very quickly, Albert,
yeah.
how many donors do you have?
how many donors do I have?
Yeah.
I think I know where you're going with this.
I'm just asking that question.
Okay,
I'm not going anywhere.
I would say close to 700.
700, okay, very good.
Yeah,
And what district would you be in if we went to district election?
I live in Capitol Hill.
Capitol Hill, District 3.
Yeah, I guess so, yes.
Okay, very good.
I just really quick on the donor question, and I know Rory's working on this thing on the public finance reform. I'm sure my opponent's talked about it, this public finance reform.
He did not, but
He
that's
did not?
okay.
Okay.
Rory will talk about it later.
Well, he will talk, but you know, I will tell you, for me, you know, I'm really not in favor, because I am a person of color running for office. I'm challenging an incumbent. Whether I had public financing money or not, I can tell you it did not make a difference. So what I don't see on it, you know, I believe big money out there is influence politics. Seattle's only a $700 limit, so you can give 10 or 700 either way. I don't see the big interest in there. You know, my opponent's got the same special interest $700 checks as other groups. You know, it's part of politics. It's the same with the mayoral races. So if we're going to do this right, one, I think we need to see term limits. Two, incumbents should not be accessed to public finance. If it really is for communities of color, underserved communities, they are the only ones that should be accessed it. And three, if we are going to, you know, be taxing people's homes for this, there better be metrics of success, meaning we have better see people come out of it with a return on investment. And I really didn't see it. This is really, it's really, I understand the nobility of it, and I applaud Rory for, you know, and others for taking on this challenge, but the way this is written, I see what it's trying to do, but I'm really not in favor with the way it's come, because it's really designed for open seats. And if you're gonna challenge an incumbent, it's really not gonna get you a lot of gains. So I wanna see people who don't have the opportunity to run like myself, but you wanna see people that are gonna win, because the taxpayer wants a return on their investment to actually see people get into office, not just run and get bashed back. So I'll just end on that,
Very good.
okay?
Thank you,
Okay.
Albert.
All right, thank you.